All right. Okay. I'm going to introduce you and we're going to get it started. Paul, is that okay?
Yeah, fantastic.
I'm going to make you the co-host of the meeting. Hold on. Let's get the participants here. I didn't ask you if you had slides.
Yeah, I've got some slides.
Okay. So then you'll just take over. You'll kick me off the screen. You've done this a million times, I'm sure, but I want to introduce you first and then we'll get this thing rocking and rolling. So I met Paul Bailey through the wonderful marketing Twitter. I follow his stuff. I've engaged with some of his great posts. First of all, he works as a strategist at a top ad agency. Believe it or not, marketing strategist, that's a real position in an ad agency. And Paul's going to talk a little bit about how an ad agency views brands and branding, because this was serendipitous. This week, we have the expert on brands and branding speaking to our class about doing this practically in terms of every week. He works with clients around this subject. So I recommend his blog. He read an excerpt from this week's module. Especially follow him on Twitter if you want to learn more about this subject of branding as well as marketing. It's one of the best follows that I can recommend. Just want to shut up now, Paul, and turn it over to you.
Thank you. Okay, so I guess just as a bit more of an introduction before I start sharing my screen. So my background is, well, now I'm a brand strategy director. I went through, trained as a designer originally, founded a design and branding agency in London, ran that for 15 years. And now I'm a brand strategy director for a company in Bristol in the UK called Halo. We do all aspects of brand, and I'll explain what that means soon. We work with what we called probably 50-50 between B2B and B2C clients, so business to business and business to consumer. We are about 35 of us. We work internationally and in the UK. But yeah, I guess now's a good time to, I'm kind of going to give you two talks. That sounds a bit serious. They're not that serious. But what I really wanted to do was to give you an opportunity to ask me questions. So I don't really want to be talking for too long. It's a good opportunity to literally just ask me anything, particularly about, I've spent over 20 years working agency side. So there's a big difference between working client side and agency side. So I think it's an opportunity to ask me about one of the few things I actually know about. So let me share this and I'll do the classic. Can you see my screen?
Yep.
Yeah?
Yep.
Okay. I'm just wondering if I can get this full screen or not.
There should be a little thing in the bottom. See the little slideshow thing? I would think it's there at the bottom of your PowerPoint. No?
No, I'm on a PDF. 1 second, I'm going to change how I've done this.
Okay.
I'll do my whole desktop, and that'll make more sense. Right. Okay. Now, can you see all of that?
Now we can see it all. Yep. Yeah. Yep.
Excellent. Okay. So, as you can read, a tale in two parts. Part one. Okay, so I'm a strategy director for a brand agency. We do advertising as well as lots of other things. But what does a brand agency do? Lots of things, big question. I thought one way to describe this, one way to show you what we do is, we're going to imagine you're a client. When we meet potential new clients, we have a kind of a deck that we show them and we talk them through, where we explain who we are and what we do. So that's what I'm going to show you, the front end of that. So this is us, this is our mark, this is the mark of Halo. And we go into clients and we say, okay, what we do is our work is designed to make people think, feel, or do something. And we're about demanding attention, affiliation, and action. And we call this being louder than love. So ultimately, what do we mean by this? As an external agency, our business is improving our clients' business. So we do this through strategy and commercial, what we call commercial creativity. We do this to encourage the desired audience perceptions and behaviors. So we want to encourage our clients' audiences to think what we want to think and to behave the way we want them to behave. And we make sure that our clients are recognized. We make sure that people remember them, and we want to encourage the kind of actions that they want from people. And we talk about how people's experience shapes your brand. We will help you improve your audience experience of you, and we will help you improve your business performance. So we make some big claims. We then say, look, we are going to change perceptions, we will change minds, we'll change behaviors. We are about creativity that affects change, and we're informed by strategy, we're designed for effect. So ultimately, clients pay us for change through creativity. They might come to us because they don't think they look right, or their people aren't doing what they want them to do. So we then go into talk about, look, we've been doing this a long time. Design Week is the leading publication, one of the leading publications in the UK. We're a top 100 agency. We're a member of the Design Business Association. We've been going for 16 years. This is kind of like, look, we know what we're doing. So we talk to clients about how they will succeed brand first, and a valuable brand for their business helps define the direction of the business and the purpose of the business. And it aligns the people who are internal, so employees and stakeholders and management, and it informs people externally. We would say this, but we say that brand is your business's most valuable asset and the best investment for long-term growth. The reason we say things like this is we're an external agency. We need to persuade our clients that what they're doing is investing in their brand. They are not just chucking money away at some agency. So this chart is from Binet and Field, and they did research that shows there's two different types of kind of marketing. One is what they call brand building, long-term sales growth. One is sales activation, which is short-term sales uplifts. Brand building affects more valuable change over time, and it actually makes sales activations more effective as well. So having a strong brand means you're going to do better, essentially. We tell clients if they have a strong brand, it will help them increase their revenue, increase their market share, increase their ROI. It can help them reduce their costs, their effort, and their risk. It's good internally. It helps improve morale. It improves your reputation, and it improves the awareness of you. And it creates custom, and it creates your identity, and ultimately it creates what you mean to people. This is what your brand is about. So we then go on to say, look, whether it's in invention, so that might be a new business. We work with some kind of startups and scale-ups who've had investment. Whether it's reinvention, so a brand might want to change completely. We work on renaming projects. We work on all sorts of things like that, where they want a big change. Or it might be that a business just thinks their brand's got a bit boring, a bit staid, needs refreshing. So whatever it is, we work across product and service, communications and culture. We pitch ourselves as the expert outsider. So we are bringing a fresh perspective to their problems. Then we just go into a bit of proof. Just like, look, we do research that has informed our brand work that we are currently doing for Batiste, global hair care brand. We are doing their global brand work and their brand architecture at the moment. We are we've been working on the brand and repositioning of one of the UK's leading public schools called Malvern College. We've delivered strategic insights to Tesco and Marks and Spencer's, which are big retailers in the UK. We've delivered brand architectures for some big education groups. We are providing digital solutions for the globe's largest ticketing provider, Ticketmaster. And we did a redesign for Budweiser Budvar, which led to a 13% sales increase. So all of these things, the reason that we do this is to show that the work that we do with brands, whether it's ad campaigns, whether it's redesigns, the point is that you get results from them that are going to deliver an improved business performance. Because ultimately, if we didn't go in with this, then people wouldn't give us any money, basically, and wouldn't let us do it. We then go on to talk about how we work together. We like to work in partnership with our clients. They understand their sector. We understand brand and marketing. And then really we kind of wrap up and say, look, your brand is, so one of the big problems with brand is that people have lots of different definitions of what it is. We say that your brand is what you mean to people and how they identify you. That's at the heart of everything that we do. We use strategic thinking. We use attention grabbing creativity. We do that across physical and digital experiences. So we have designers, we have digital team and build. And ultimately, the whole point of our work is to encourage action from your audience on screen and in person. Then just to give you a bit more of an idea of what's in the business and a external sort of brand agency or a creative agency. Fundamentally, brand is at the center, and we work through strategy and creativity. What that means is we have a design team, we have a digital team or a technology team. We have people who manage the accounts, so what we call client partners. We have people who can research, and we have people who are probably more on the data side. So from the digital stuff, we will have people who can report on digital marketing and what's working, what's not working, etc., etc. So we have all of those things, and ultimately they're just the different ways that we deliver an experience, and whether that experience is for the client, for the customer, for employees, whatever, that's ultimately the end point. So to go into this just a little bit, we talk about our two core points are strategy and creativity. Strategy is about making sure the business and the brand are heading in the right direction. There's loads of work, there's loads of kind of confusion between strategy and tactics and all that sort of stuff. Strategy is setting your direction of travel, helping you win better, and making sure you matter to the people who matter to you. Creativity is essentially that we say that creativity is your competitive advantage in an attention economy, meaning everyone is trying to be noticed. If you are creative, if you stand out, if you're of interest to people, that is your advantage, and that's why you're going to stand out from the crowd, and you do that by being creative. This is just a bit, we just go into a bit more detail about the different strands that we have within the business. But we kind of wrap up with, look, people's experience of you is greater than anything else. That's what it's all about. Whether those experiences are on screen or whether those experiences are in person, every experience that someone has should add to the tapestry that is your brand. And that audience experience, that is the culmination, for us, is the culmination of the creative process. So our creative process leads to the moment that someone experiences the thing that we've designed or done. And then it's the beginning of the learning process. So when someone experiences it, it's no good for us to just do it and then step back. We need to learn, did that work? Did the thing that we were trying to get them to do, did they do it? The thing that we were trying to encourage them to think, did they think that? We have to learn, otherwise we'll just keep doing something. We could just keep doing something that doesn't work. So we have this idea that we call associated memorable moments. Now, I think now is probably a good time to kind of pause, because this is where we go into part 2. And I don't know whether, or what might be good is for a pause there for you to kind of ask questions maybe specifically about an agency and agency life, because I don't want to just be sitting here talking to you constantly and just boring you all. But the second part is going to be a bit more detail about what we mean by brand. But I thought it would be good to now to sort of say, look, is there anything else you want to know about what it means to be an external brand and creative agency?
Yeah, this is a good opportunity because this is our first expert having worked on the agency, or had his own agency essentially for a long time, works for one of the hottest agencies, certainly in Great Britain. If you have a question about ad agencies, I mean, maybe the first one is, Paul, any recommendations for how a recent college graduate could get a job at an ad agency?
It's a really competitive, it's a competitive area. Creative agencies are really competitive. So whether that's a brand agency, an ad agency, digital, whatever. So kind of similar to what our challenge is with clients, your challenge is to get noticed. So your first challenge is to get noticed, and that's it. Now, people take different approaches to that. Some people will try and come up with a really clever CV or a really clever kind of essentially like direct mail, so something they'll send to an agency that is going to stand out. Some people will take, I've heard of much more direct approaches. So I've heard of someone who really wanted to work for 1 or 2 agencies in the UK, and what they did was they hired or they bought a poster site that was directly opposite the ad agency, and they designed a poster, put it up, and everyone from the agency saw it. So really, really targeted. There was someone actually in the UK who, so there's a big ad agency called McCann. I don't know if you know of McCann.
Yep.
And there was a young graduate who really wanted to work for them, and she. So, I can't remember. There's a statue of the young girl facing the bull.
In New York. Yep.
Yeah, on Wall Street. And she sprayed herself completely silver. So she was like the statue. And then she went and stood outside McCann and just did the pose and just stood there for ages. So you can take a real kind of experiential approach, just like, I'm going to do something really crazy, or really ultimately it's you've got to get noticed and you've got to get remembered. So you can do something like that that's really creative, or you can just keep ringing people and keep bothering them. I mean, how I got my first job in an agency in London was I really wanted to work for this agency, and I just kept bothering them. I kept going for drinks in their local pub when I knew they were going to be in there. And then it got to the point where they were like, oh, how's it going, Paul? You all right? And I was like, yeah, and just get chatting. But I'm sure they realized I was basically stalking them. but but you just got to do what you got to do to get noticed. Just kind of firing out CVs with a default like "Dear Sir" or "Madam" is not going to cut it. So yeah, the best piece of advice is do your homework, figure out who you want to get a job with, pick maybe 5 companies, and reach out to them, but really specifically. So you should know what projects they've just worked on, who their clients are. You should even know the names of their senior management team. You've got to do your homework on them so that you are going to them, and that as soon as you're talking to them, they're like, this person really knows us and wants to work with us.
Now, one question what's the difference? You mentioned you could work for a brand agency, an ad agency. I know a digital agency is, how do you define the difference between the 3 of them? I guess I always believed a brand agency was essentially the same thing as an ad agency. How do you differ from those 3?
So in the UK, it might be different in the US, but so ad agencies traditionally, I mean, it's very blurred now. So ad agencies will do brand work, brand agencies will do ad work, but ad agencies were traditionally the ones who did advertising. So whether that's large out-of-home posters, whether that's digital, whether it's paid social advertising, whatever, it's creating adverts. So communications, adverts, generally through a campaign. Brand agencies, like we do that, but we also do work that's probably more wide-ranging. So we will give advice we will do brand identity projects, so branding work like new logos and visual environments, but we'll also do, it kind of taps a lot more into the wider mix of marketing. So particularly our brand strategy will be helping them understand their market and their audience and their competitors better, and then advising them on how they can win better through creativity and strategic thinking. Now, sometimes so recently my advice was to a client who sells sort of outdoor wear, so bottles and reusable bottles and cups and like chilies and people like that. Our advice was you need to do some pricing research, because your prices don't really stack up with, so they think they were really high end, but they were priced relatively cheaply compared to their competitors. Now what we said to them was, look, all that does is it makes you look cheap. It just makes you look cheap. It doesn't make, like, people don't put you next to the people who you think are your competitors because you're so much cheaper than them. You should put your prices up, because that will change the perception of your brand. So we do more than just advertising, but we do ad campaigns as well. So we did ad campaigns for them, but we would also give them advice on pricing. We give them advice on the classic 4 Ps of marketing. We give them advice on where to place their products. We're working with them at the minute on their direct to consumer strategy. And their e-commerce platforms. So that's kind of the difference, but ad agencies are moving more into the brand space. Brand agencies do ad campaigns. Digital is probably a bit more specific, but we have a digital department. Ad agencies have a digital department. So it's very blurred at the moment.
And it's even more frightening with these consultancies now thinking they can do marketing. I forget which one did a website, but they were sued for millions by the client because the website was unworkable. I mean, you couldn't use it.
That was, so there's a company in Accenture. So
yes, Accenture. Yep.
Yeah, they're a management consultancy. But what Accenture have done is they are a management consultancy, but they realized that they weren't very creative and they were losing out on work. They went round and just bought up loads of really good agencies. So they bought up some of the best digital agencies going. They bought up an agency called Fjord. They bought an agency called Droga. All these great agencies, they just bought them, consumed them, and they're really taking a load of work away from ad and brand agencies.
Mm.
The story you're talking about is they did the new website for Hertz car rental.
Yes.
And it cost something like 43 million. And I think that, I'm not even sure if that was dollars or pounds, but it's still a hell of a lot. And it just wasn't, it was rubbish. So they basically got 43 million and it was rubbish, and they were getting sued to get that money back. So yeah, there's a lot of competition for agencies with clients. There's a lot of competition for jobs within agencies. So it's a competitive area. So
how do you differentiate your agency from all these other guys out there?
With great difficulty. It's,
your people are one way. Your people are one way, certainly.
Yeah, our people is one way. I think ultimately the problem for agencies is agencies put out all these kind of like, oh, this is our unique process that we go, this is our process and these are our process diagrams. It's like rubbish. Like the process that agencies go through is pretty much the same. Everyone does the same. They figure out they do the diagnosis, they figure out what the problem might be. They come up with their kind of creative and strategic solutions for the problems and make it happen. That's pretty much what everyone does. So all this stuff of we've got our unique process and all this sort of stuff, unless it's an agency and there are more of these who start to use AI and machine learning and all that sort of stuff, that's different. So the process, there's no differentiation. That's it. Mm-hmm. Ultimately, it's a B2B sell. Like we sell business to business, and really we talk about it in what the industry talks a lot about is, and there's a lot more of these days, is what we call chemistry meetings. So our team will go and meet a client's head of marketing team, like the CMO and whoever, and essentially they've already looked at your website, they've already done their homework. So whoever they invite for a chemistry team, they know you can all do the job. You can do the job. Anyone that we pick can do the job. Mm-hmm. The chemistry meeting is, are we going to enjoy working with you? That's it. So
that's bad. That's pretty cool.
Yeah. So see, it's not cool when you don't win the job.
Yeah, well, it's just like the pitch. You lose the pitch, the same thing. Yeah. It's not cool.
Oh, they must hate us. So,
oh yeah, just think of the way you torture yourself. Oh
yeah,
man.
Exactly. So when you've got you've had a meeting and it's all about chemistry and it's like, oh, well, you're just being judged on you as people. And you lose. It's like, oh,
your fault. You weren't exciting. It could be ugly.
You weren't interesting enough. So and this is one thing that our founder, that I think you know on Twitter as well, Nick Ellis. Yep. He talks a lot about what a lot of creative agencies, whether that's ad agencies or whatever, what they don't do or what they've forgotten that they need to do is sell. You've got to sell yourselves to the client. You've got to persuade them you are the right agency instead of someone else. So the differentiation really is the people. An agency is just a group of people, ultimately. There's no different, people don't use different products. We all use the same software. We all use the same process. It's just people. It's just people and their ideas. That's the difference. So
that's what the process you use is what we teach. I mean, certainly we do the brand diagnosis, the brand architecture, the situational analysis. That's the first third. And then the next third, we put the strategy together. And then we tie that back to the situational analysis. And then we do a tactical plan that we also tie back to what we've learned. And then we look at it. I mean, that's essentially what we teach here in my marketing strategy class. I think that's correct. Paul, would you agree with that's kind of the approach you guys take as well?
If that's what you teach, that's a good thing, because that's basically what we do in industry. So now, it's those three sections. diagnosis, strategy, planning, and execution.
Now, you're when you do brand architecture, do you get involved with hiring research, outside research? You know, is it all done internally by your strategy team? I'm curious how you handle that in an ad agency environment.
Yeah, so when we do research, so I did my master's in brand, so I had to learn how to research properly. But what we will do is first, so when you're researching, when you're doing your diagnosis, the first go-to is, okay, so we do a thing called backwards market research. What backwards market research is what it's designed to avoid is what a lot of clients do. A lot of clients think we need to do research. They pay loads of money to get a massive document done, but they don't really know why they're doing the research. They just know they need to do research. They have a massive research document done. They don't know what to do with it. There's just loads of data. And what they end up doing is just kind of chucking it to us and saying, oh, can you find out what's important in all of this 100-page document of, okay. What we do is backwards market research. So what we mean by that is we say, okay, what are we trying to do? What's our hypothesis, or what's our kind of intention at the end of this? What do we need to know to be able to do that? So we're kind of working backwards. And then we say, okay, to be able to know those things, what do we need to ask and who do we need to ask? And that then shapes your research. And what that does is when you get the research, it's then easily informing the things that you're actually trying to do. When we're doing the research, we always start by trying to find any secondary research that already exists, because it's much cheaper, much quicker. So some areas there's lots of research done on it, and you find that from various kind of sources such as WARC or Mintel or whoever. If there isn't any, or if there's gaps, which often there's gaps, you then have to go and do your primary research. Then we decide what type of research we need to do. Do we need to do qualitative research? Do we want to do focus groups? Do we want to do surveys? Do we want to do quantitative research, and just kind of questionnaires? And then we will use a research company who specializes in whatever we need to do. So we don't do the actual kind of questions. So there's research companies who they will have access to sample groups. You know, they can target according to what our profiles are that we want our sample group. We will write all the questions and they will just do it and give us the data, and then we take it from there. So we will use people to do primary research, but we will write everything. We'll come up with the kind of thing that we're asking, and we'll decide what type of research we need to do.
And you do find that the key thing is really how you frame the problem, because if you don't get the problem right, you're in trouble, right? I mean,
the thing about research is your research is only ever as good as the questions that you ask. If you ask the wrong question, you're never going to get the right answer. So there's lots of difficulties in asking questions about the kind of question you need to ask. There's also difficulties in terms of ethics of questions. There's also difficulties in terms of are the questions leading people to a certain answer, which is what a lot of bad research does, which is it kind of, people go in with the kind of answers that they want, so they write the questions to kind of force an answer that they want to get. So yeah, there's some terrible research out there, but and we see a lot of it from clients.
Well, the good thing is you can pick through the garbage, because a lot of clients can't do that. Well, now I'm doing a lot of talking. Where's my students? Any questions? Here you have an expert on ad agencies, on brand agencies. Doesn't anybody have an interest? You can put the questions in the chats. You can put them in the chat box if you'd like. Okay, here you go. Here we go. Here. Of the three kinds of agencies, branding, digital, or ads, which one you say a college grad could learn the most from, as far as, if they hooked up with one of those three options, branding, digital, or advertising agency?
Well, that was just three that I mentioned. There's actually loads of different types of agencies. There's actually some digital marketing agencies. There's all sorts of different agencies. My advice would be a brand agency, a true brand agency in terms of that they will do strategy as well. You will learn much more there because the tactical executions will differ. If you just go to an agency that does one thing, so say you went to a digital agency that just does websites, you're going to be very limited. If you just go to an ad agency who just does ad campaigns, you'll learn a lot, but it's relatively narrow. What a true strategic brand agency, and why I say that is there are agencies who say they're brand agencies, but really they're design agencies. So they design logos and look and feel. You learn a whole raft of stuff about business challenges and how you respond to them through strategy and creativity at a brand agency. But then again, that's me saying that, who works at a brand agency.
Well, you do use the 4 Ps a whole lot more than the folks over there in the ad agency that they only use the P called promotion. All right. Anybody else have any more questions, or else we'll get, by the way, the young man who asked that question, thanks you for that great answer. Thank you, Paul. Are there any other questions before we move on to part 2? And then you can throw those questions in the chat box, because I want to hear this next part. What is meant by brand? Since everybody's being quiet, I don't know. We'll just put those questions in the chat box.
Question.
Oh, a question. Go ahead.
Yeah. How do you address concerns if like the public or like people in general are like negatively have negative feelings towards like a brand? How would you address that?
If they have negative feelings towards a brand, so what if say someone had negative feelings towards one of our clients and we wanted to try and address that. It really depends on the type of negative feelings and where they came from. And I'll give you an example, which is recently we've been working with a client, and they are a producer of lots of dairy products, but one of their dairy products is goat's milk. And we were doing a whole repositioning work on their goat's milk, like talking about how goat's milk is great for gut health, how it's full of prebiotics, how it's so good for you. We were aiming it at kids because it's great for them. Before it was going to launch, what happened was videos came out in the UK press of some people in the farms that they use being filmed punching goats. And it was all in the UK press that this brand that we're working with, they punch goats. Now, it was horrific. And what happened was, it got to if it's as serious as that, what we had to do was bring in essentially like crisis PR company. So when it's that bad, you're like, look, we literally cannot help you. You need a crisis PR company who can manage your reputation. If it's not quite that bad, one of the things that we do is to not say anything sometimes. So it's really important to learn that there's times when actually you're better keeping your mouth shut. And this is particularly true on social channels. So if you're working for a brand, something happens and there's a negative reaction to it, that's not as serious as, a very rightly negative reaction to people punching goats. But there's a negative reaction and there's a kind of a backlash on social. What generally would tend to happen if you are a kind of a liked brand already, if you sit back, there is this natural wave on social of the first wave of people will attack you. There will then come a wave of people who would defend you, and you need to give them enough space to come in and defend you, because when there's peer-to-peer defense of the brand, it's much more effective than you just kind of firing out defensive tactics. I think it really depends on what type it is, but there's also opportunities in things like this. So I'll give you a really good example. In the UK, we've got KFC. You've got KFC there, I'm sure, but we have it here too. But a couple of years ago, they ran out of chicken. So KFC ran out of chicken, which is obviously a disaster. People are complaining on social media that KFC's got no chicken, they can't get their chicken. What KFC did, kind of at first just held their hands up and went, sorry, supply chain problems, couldn't get our chicken in. What they then did was they ran a whole massive ad campaign, which just had a big KFC bucket, but instead of KFC, the logo said FCK, so just fuck. And then underneath, they just had this copy that was just like, basically just going, we fucked up, sorry, like, and it was brilliant, just swung momentum back to them again. Everyone was just like, oh, okay, yeah, that's funny. Don't worry about the time I couldn't get my chicken the other week. So it's all about kind of picking your moment, maybe not even having a moment and stepping back and letting other people fight your battles, or try and spin it and be kind of witty. If you've got the right kind of brand, I mean, that wouldn't work for every brand. Yeah, so there's different approaches, but yeah, or if you've been caught punching
Tylenol example. We throw the Tylenol example out all the time because that's the best of all. Some guy was killing people opening Tylenol bottles, so they came out with pulled everything off the shelf, came in with that tamper-proof top. Senate. I mean, they were number one again within 2 months or something like that. Crazy. Now I have a student that asked this question. I don't want to move to I do want to get to you talking about brands because you are the expert on Twitter. You're one of my favorite. Your blog is phenomenal. So I want to hear this next part. But what digital tools would you recommend a graduate be super strong in? So once they get out, they could start working, designing. I'm thinking about design tools.
So I think in terms of design tools doing the job, I guess there's the classic Adobe suite of stuff that we basically use for everything. So whether it's from sort of animation stuff like video, like motion graphics, to we generally would use pretty much all the kind of Adobe stuff as a rule. The digital stuff, the digital stuff's a bit more, there's lots of different things that people could be using. So whether it's our UX guys will use various things for wireframing, and it depends what area you want to go into. So digital, there's kind of more differences. And this is actually really boring, but being very comfortable with things like Word and Keynote and even Excel is actually really useful, not for designing, but for just working in the studio. We do a lot of designing decks for presentation. We used to do them in InDesign, but we wanted client partners. So our account managers are called client partners. We wanted them to be able to input to them. So now we use Google Slides, and we design in Google Slides because it means multiple people can input onto the same deck at the same time. So there's a lot of times we now use software like that's in the cloud that multiple people can work on at the same time. So for strategy stuff, I used to, well, not used to, still do things like this, stick Post-it notes on the wall. But I also use digital tools, digital platforms like Miro, which is an online, like cloud-based platform where you can kind of do Post-it notes and mind maps and UX flowcharts and all sorts of stuff really easily, really quickly. So there's loads of platforms out there that do a lot of the legwork for you as well. So yeah.
Adobe, that's a great suggestion. Our students can use Adobe on campus for free. So that's a great suggestion. And we, any students that want to, you've got a few months left. Now's as good a time as any to learn that. So that covers all the questions. By the way, that student that asked that last question, thanks you for it. Let's move on to the next part, Paul. I don't want to hold this up anymore.
Okay, so let's go. Part 2. What on earth do we mean by brand, right? And what do we mean by this term, associated memorable moments? So, brand, okay. Brand is old news. Brand was invented, well, not invented, but the concept came up over sort of 150 years ago, industrial era. Essentially, it was to brand packaged goods so that people knew that the thing they were buying was the same as the thing they bought last time. That was essentially where the concept of brand started. It was very much about branding something so you recognized it. Brands have become much more complex. Brands are now what is termed hereby. So there's a guy called Adam Arvidsson, who's a professor, writes a lot about brand. He says that they are a premise for communication, interaction, and experience. What I say is that what used to be the case was that your brand was what you told people it is. What Jeff Bezos says is your brand is what other people say about you when you're not in the room. What I say is that your brand is what people agree it is. So what I mean by that is you can tell people what your brand is, but if they don't agree that that's the case, it's not really your brand. So there's this constant dialogue between what you say you are and what other people agree that you are. And the closer that you can get to that, the stronger your brand's going to be. Another key thing to talk about is, which if anyone read that article I wrote for WARC, I talk about it in that your brand is not your business. The brand is not the business. So what I mean by that is a brand is obviously totally linked to a business, but they are different entities. Businesses want control of their biggest assets. And actually, this idea that a brand is intangible, and intangible assets make up, well, in 2015, so it was a while ago, they made up 84% of the assets of the S&P 500 businesses. So they're tangible assets, being either real estate or machinery or whatever, makes up at 16%. 84% is those intangible assets, and brand is a massive part of that. So it's hugely important to a business. But unfortunately for businesses, brand is something that you cannot fully control. So we talk about how a brand is constantly in process. It's constantly being developed. It's constantly evolving. a good way to think about this is you think about how you perceive, I don't know, Nike, and think about what Nike meant 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 20 years ago, 30 years ago. Its meaning is evolving. What it means to you, what it means to culture, what it means to society, its role in the world is always evolving. So we say that the brand is always evolving. So we have this idea of an audience-centered view of brand. Ultimately, great strategy and creativity. The whole point of it is to encourage the reaction that you want and a subsequent action. So when you are doing something, you want people to think a certain way and to do something. Like I've just said there, forgot I had that slide. So because of that, your brand is in part shaped by the experience of your audience. This is what we talk about when we talk about associated memorable moments. So I know earlier on I said agencies don't have their own processes. Well, we have this, and this is our way of thinking, and we've trademarked it. Ultimately, what we say is a brand is shaped through a series of moments that people remember and associate with one another. Okay, what do we mean? And I'm just going to talk you through each of these, and this will give you 3 key points about brand. So the first thing is associated and being identified. So Mark Ritson, I don't know if any of you watch or listen to or read Mark Ritson, extremely smart professor of marketing who just makes things really easy to understand.
They know who he is if they're reading all the stuff I put in their modules every week. They've seen Ritson, they've read Ritson. They better love him like I love him.
Good. He said, less than 1 in 5 people who see an advert of yours will A, remember it the next day at all, or B, be able to attribute that advert to your brand. So that's 1 in 5, or less than 1 in 5. So it's vital that people associate every moment they experience your brand with other experiences of the brand. How do you do this? You use what we call brand codes or distinctive brand assets. Now, what these might be is obviously a logo. It could be a tagline. It could be a celebrity. It could be a character. It could be a product shape, or it could be a sound. These are the things that businesses repeat time and time and time again to make sure that people identify and associate that thing, that moment with every other moment. So there's been research done as well that says this is how effective they are at improving brand recall. So I don't know how much you know about brand awareness, but there's 2 types of brand awareness: brand recall and brand recognition. Brand recognition is if I were to show you a logo, okay, say I show you the Nike logo, you would be able to recall that it is Nike, okay? So I'm showing you a prompt, and then you can recall what brand that prompt associates it with. I'm sorry, you can recognize it. That's recognition. Brand recall is I don't show you any prompt, and I just say to you, name a sports brand, and then the brand recall would be if you just say Nike with no prompt whatsoever. So here they've done research into what are the most effective sort of brand codes or brand assets. And actually the most effective by far is a character. So when you think about characters in advertising, this is by far the most recognizable way that people associate and that remember brands, and celebrities come after that. But actually that's the most effective visual cue. The most effective cue is a sonic, an oral, like a sound. So whether that's the sound of your Mac turning on, or whether that's whatever sound that is, that sonic brand cues are the most effective ways to improve recall of your brand. When we work with clients on developing these, we work on 3 things as well. That they need to be distinctive. So you need assets that are distinctively you. You need to be able to own it, and you need to be able to protect it. So whether that's trademarking, whether that's registering it, whether that's copyright if you've written some music or whatever, it needs to be protectable, because these are the assets by which people will identify you. If other companies can copy them and you're not protecting them, then you're in trouble. So the first thing we always talk to clients about is, whenever we're doing anything, an ad campaign, whatever, are you recognizable? Do people identify that it's you? The second part is, in terms of what we talk about being associated, is, does your target audience want to be associated with your brand? So if you're, what your brand means to people, is this something that people want to align themselves with? So these 2 ideas of, can people recognize you? Can they associate all these moments with each other? And do they want themselves to be associated with your brand? So a good example of this is without going in depth with this, your self-identity through the brand. So what it means for how I come across to someone else by having an Apple iPhone, or by riding a Harley Davidson, or by whatever. It's this idea of the brand being kind of like showing that I'm the kind of person who associates with this brand, and that kind of makes part of me, basically. The second part is memorable. So we've already kind of talked about this, is we live in what we'd call an attention economy. So what do we mean by that is that traditionally, essentially before the internet, information was the limiting factor, right? So just being able to find something out was the difficult thing. People knowing you existed was the hard thing. Particularly with the internet now, information is not a limiting factor. People can find out what they want to find out right now at their fingertips. What the limiting factor today is attention. Everyone is fighting for attention. But it's not enough to get someone's attention. Getting someone's attention is pointless if they don't remember you. So you've got to be remembered. You need your brand to be remembered. Ultimately, if your brand is going to be worth anything, you need to have a shared and agreed meaning. So what does this brand mean? So I don't mean you need to be able to recite exactly what it means, but if I was to say to people, what does Nike mean? You'd be kind of roughly in the same ballpark, I would imagine. There'll be differences, but everyone would kind of know roughly what it means to be that brand. So that's why it's valuable, because there is a shared meaning that has kind of cultural and social relevance. So say one thing and say it clearly. And I've got the classic Donald Trump cap here. And the reason is that for whatever your views on his politics are, that's not the point. The point is, if you have a phrase or a slogan or a tagline and you repeat it and you repeat it and you repeat it, it cuts through and it sticks with people. And what a lot of businesses forget is this repetition. Just keep saying this message and get this message through, because you're trying to get your message through a whole world of noise. And if you just keep saying the same thing again and again and again, it cuts through the noise. We talk about, in marketing, we talk about mental availability. How easy is it for people to bring your brand to mind? That's key. There's there's some research done as well about advertising, which is the most effective advertising is emotional campaigns rather than rational campaigns. So by leading with emotional benefits rather than rational benefits, your advertising can be more effective, and it's always more effective, but it gets increasingly more effective over the years. Also, there's research that shows to gain new market effectiveness, the two most important things are creativity, and we talked about this before, that actually by being creative is how you're going to get cut through in a marketplace. That's how you stand out. That's how you get noticed. That's how you get remembered, is about being creative. The second one of these is reach. So reach is at 22%. Reach is basically how many people are we getting out to? How much of the market know we exist and can see us? So what we talk about, or what Byron Sharp talks about, is this idea of mental and physical availability. Do people remember you? Can they see you? Or can they get hold of you? There's also this idea called digital availability, which is a kind of a third strand that's kind of coming through at the minute. There's an idea, well, it's not an idea, it's research has been done. So share of market essentially is, what is the share of your market that you have? Share of voice is, what is your share of the communications within that same competitor set? Research shows if you increase your share of voice, so this is what people call excess share of voice. If you increase your share of voice, so you overspend, eventually your share of market will increase to match your share of voice. So this is how brands grow through investment in marketing, is that they outspend their competition, they get seen everywhere. If they're running creative campaigns, it's even more effective. So this idea of share of voice and share of market is really important to learn about. And actually, there's stuff that's been done by a few people in the UK. So a guy called James Hankins and Les Binet as well, on this idea of share of search, which I'd advise people on just looking up and listening. I think James is actually doing a talk tomorrow at the Festival of Marketing in the UK. So it's just basically share of search is kind of similar to share of voice, but it's based on digital searches. What is your share of search within your competitive set? And the thinking at the research at the minute is that it's predictive. So if your share of search, something like 3 to 6 months before, will predict your share of market. So it's really valuable, something to know. So we say being memorable, that's going to improve brand awareness. So ultimately, this point is, look, you've got to get people's attention. And this is what we say to clients, like, look, whatever we're doing, are people going to is it going to grab anyone's attention? And are they going to remember it for the reasons we want them to remember it? So that's the second point. That's in memorable. The last point in moments is it's all about experience. So we don't remember our lives as this kind of continuous moment. Instead, what we remember is moments in time. So if you think about, let's say the last holiday that you had, or the last book that you read, or the last film that you watched. Let's say the last film you watched, you don't remember the whole film. What you remember is key parts of the film that you then kind of tag together and you go, oh yeah, that was the film. This happened, then that happened, then they did that, then there was that funny bit, then that. You remember these kind of key moments. And then when you join them together, that's what the film was. Brand is exactly the same. People experience your brand through moments in time, and all of these moments add up. The cumulative effect is to create the brand. That's what they do. So in every moment that people come into contact with your brand, you want to encourage the kind of reactions and actions that you want. So there's a guy in America, BJ Fogg, who developed this behavior model. Because ultimately, in every moment that you have, you want to encourage a behavior. That's the whole point of what we do. He says that you need 3 things to have a behavior happen. People need the motivation to do it, so they have to want to do it. They need the ability to do it, so they need to be able to actually do the thing. And they need a prompt, so they need a nudge to say, oh, you know that thing that you want to do? Here's how you can do it. Go do it now. That's how to encourage behavior, these 3 kind of simple things. So we are working actually with a guy who teaches behavior design. And this is kind of at the center of it. So moments, they could encourage immediate action, or they might sow seeds for the future. Moments might be about short-term sales activations, but they might be about long-term brand building. So they're kind of quite fluid like that. And also they allow for an emergent strategy to your brand. So an emergent strategy, all we mean by that is saying, look, it's all fine and well setting a strategy to grow your brand, but then say you said, right, our strategy is going to be, we're going to be the most eco-friendly brand out there, and that's going to be our strategy. If in 6 months' time, your massive competitor now decides they're going to pitch themselves on being the eco-friendly brand, you need to change your strategy, because it doesn't matter how many times you talk about being eco-friendly. If they're spending way more money at being eco-friendly than you are, your message isn't going to cut through. So emergence means stuff happens you can't control, you need to react. That's what emergent strategy means. So there's a guy in America who I know called Marty Neumer. I always say his surname wrong, but something like that. And he has this thing where he talks about touch points. Touch points are the things that we create. So a website would be a touch point, an advert would be a touch point. So it's where people come into contact with your brand. We essentially kind of flip them and just call these kind of moments. But he has this kind of process where he creates a kind of a order between all the touch points. And one really important thing about moments is, and about experience, is obviously what you say matters. So what you're communicating matters. But there's also, I don't know if you know much about Marshall McLuhan, but he seems to have kind of gone out of vogue recently, but he had this a really good saying, which is the medium is the message. What he means by that is that the medium by which you experience something has an effect on your perception of what you've experienced. So the best example of this would be, I could show you the same advert, but I could show you it on a cinema screen, and I could show you it on a pre-roll on YouTube. You would perceive that advert differently by nature of how you saw it and how you experienced it. So it's not only enough. So this is really important if you're going to get involved in planning, planning what channels you're going to plan for a campaign. Obviously, if you are targeting specific audiences, you say, okay, if we're targeting that audience, where are they already? You go to where they are. So the medium is the message. It's really important not just to say the right thing, but to say it in the right place. So again, the final point, where can we best give our audience moments? How likely are they to think, feel, or do what we want them to do? So that's, associated memorable moments. Just kind of finally, these can be grand, they can be simple, they can be planned or spontaneous. So I've got 2 examples. One example is Qantas, Australian airline. they had this event where they were sending their last ever Boeing plane out to the kind of airplane graveyard, and it was flying out over the sea. And all of a sudden, it took an unexpected turn, and then it took another unexpected turn, and then another and another and another. And what was happening was the plane's flight path was creating the Qantas logo. And it was a big sort of moment that actually how it was associated was they were creating the flying kangaroo. It was memorable. It was at huge scale. It was surprising. It was unexpected. People didn't think it was going to happen. And the moment was, it was this kind of final flight. So this was a grand associated memorable moment. Heavily uses brand codes and the distinctive brand assets, creates, that really sticks in people's heads, and you know, this kind of moment in time. Another example, so that's a grand one, a really simple one. So there's a toy store that's near me, and we have a young son who's 3 years old. And actually this happened when he was 2. We're in this store, and it was time that we wanted to leave, and I was having no joy in trying to encourage my son to leave because he's in a store full of toys. And yeah, couldn't get him to go. You're sort of starting to get the sense of, oh, he's going a bit, he's going to lose it now with me because I'm going to have to drag him out of here at this rate. But what happened was, one of the store assistants came up to me, or came up to both of us and said, look, have you seen the bubbles outside? And we're like, oh no, what do you mean? She's like, oh, come outside and see the bubbles. And for a 2-year-old, the only thing more exciting than a room full of toys is bubbles. So we go outside, and she just has this big bubble machine. She blows some bubbles. He's really happy. All the bubbles kind of float down the street. We wander down the street chasing the bubbles. We're now away from the store. We've left. Really, really simple act was it. It was obviously associated because I was in the store. It was with the shop assistant. Memorable. It stuck in my head. It was just the relief and gratitude, but it was just something that someone went a little bit beyond what they really needed to do. And it didn't cost them anything to do it. It cost them whatever bubbles cost to do. So I guess to sort of wrap it all up, again, back to Mark Ritson, because I think he talks a lot of sense. The biggest brand challenge isn't getting sales. It's not loyalty. It's not conversion. It's about getting noticed repeatedly and constantly coming to mind. So I had these kind of 3 key points. Really, it's about creating these moments that keep your brand alive. You've got to keep your brand in motion. You've got to have a voice. You've got to make an impact. You've got to be memorable. Otherwise, you've got nothing. Got to make it easy for people to associate every moment with you. People aren't going to work at finding out whose advert it is. You need to make it clear who it is. And you've got to mean something to people. If you don't mean anything, all you're doing is just selling a thing. That's it. And that is the end of that. You're on mute, I think.
That was fantastic. Let's stop sharing the screen. I want to take a picture of everybody here.
Okay, hold on 1 second. How do I stop sharing my screen?
Hold on. I could do it. Hold on a second. Oh shucks, no. Hold on. I did that wrong. Hold on.
No, all right. I covered it up.
You got it. Okay, there's everybody. I want to take a picture of everybody. We did this the last time. I kind of like it. Let's get the thumbs up thing. Hold on, everybody. I want to get my camera because I want to get a memory of this shot. All right, everybody, thumbs up, thumbs up. 1, 2, 3. Yeah. Well, do you believe this? Get away. Hold on a second. I got to dismiss my stupid email. This stupid email system is wanting me to see that. Boom. Beautiful. Okay. Are there any other questions? I mean, we have pretty much come to the end, but I want you, first of all, students, I want you to realize what you just saw and what you just heard. A masterful presentation on branding from one of the sharpest minds that I found on this subject. So my suggestion to you is hopefully you wrote some notes and you take this with you in your careers, because this was solid gold. Truthfully, Paul, thank you so much, man. This was awesome. I knew it would be, and I appreciate it. Now, when I get out of Twitter jail, I'm going to put this up there, but don't ask. I got mad and I lost my temper, and so I'm not going to do that anymore. My wife is reminding me that my temper gets me in trouble. So anyway, that's all I have. Are there any questions before we say good night? Anybody have anything else to add, or do you just want to say thank you for what you just heard?